Attention women's health professionals, the next round of FAMM is just around the corner. Classes start on October 4th. FAMM is the perfect program for busy women's health professionals who want to offer fertility awareness charting support in their practice. FAMM cuts out all the fluff and only focuses on what you need to serve your clients better. Each module, homework assignment, in-class training, and chart review session is there for a reason. Where will you be 9 months from now? With a FAMM certification, you'll have a brand new skill set that will allow you to use the menstrual cycle as a diagnostic tool and vital sign in your practice. Your confidence in analyzing and interpreting menstrual cycle charts will be at a level you can't even imagine today. And you'll have a brand new offering in your business that will allow you to reach more clients. This knowledge is truly life-changing. Transform your practice in 9 months. You won't regret it. Join us this October in FAMM. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive to apply today. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 487. Today I'm sharing a brand new episode in my FAMM Practitioner series. I'm sharing my interview with Dr. Tina Krupczak, and today's episode we really dive into her experience with endometriosis. I feel like today's episode really gives a window into what this is really like for women who are struggling with endometriosis and who may not have even heard the word endometriosis. A few things really stand out to me about Tina's story. One was the generational aspect. In her case, her mother had experience with painful periods, and I believe her grandmother also. And so it's one of those things where it was like, oh, this is just how it is in our family. I've just seen in my practice how when we feel that this is just how it is, it's not that we're complacent, but I feel like it just leaves us with the idea that there's nothing we can do about it, compounded by the fact that when you actually go to seek support from medical professionals, it's quite rare for women to actually be supported and thoroughly investigated when they're presenting, even with extreme period pain. Obviously, this is something that we want to change and shift, and this is something that we focus on in the FAMM Practitioner program so that we can really be strong advocates for women who are presenting with these symptoms so that we can help them to get those diagnoses in a more timely fashion. And so actually now that I'm recording the introduction, there's one question that I actually wish that I would have asked Tina, which is how many years to diagnosis. But based on our history intake conversation, I feel like she falls right into that average, unfortunately. So if you've never heard, on average, it takes anywhere from 8 to 12 years for women to actually receive a diagnosis of endometriosis following the onset of their painful symptoms. And so, off the top of my head, I don't have the exact date in my mind, but Tina had these painful periods from her first period, primary dysmenorrhea, and she didn't get a diagnosis until last year or the year before, midway through the FAMM program. And so this is something to just really consider, how this is not a rare story. It's not something that is necessarily, it should be unusual, right, for it to take that long to get a diagnosis when you have a chronic illness. But obviously it's not rare. This is not uncommon. And Tina's story, unfortunately, is quite representative of what many women experience when they have severe endo. So with that said, let me share a little bit about Tina, and then we'll go into today's episode. Dr. Tina Krupczak is a board-certified licensed dietitian nutritionist with a master's in nutrition and integrative health and a doctorate of clinical nutrition. In her private practice, she has helped countless individuals achieve their unique health goals. Inspired by her clients' fertility success and desiring to share these effective strategies, Tina decided to conceive, a practice dedicated to proactive and holistic preconception planning that centers around the time before you're officially trying. With a focus on changing men and women's lifestyle and nutrition habits to optimize both of their reproductive health, don't get her started on any of the following: how overlooked men's reproductive health is, how people prefer trends to science, or the short-sighted obsession with a woman's date of birth. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into today's interview with Tina. And I'm excited to be here today with Dr. Tina Krupczak. Tina and I have been working together now for a couple of years. You were not only a member of the FAMM program, but you joined the FAMM alumni program. So we've had just a really nice opportunity to get to know each other a little bit. And of course, you've had the opportunity to go beyond the deep dive in FAMM as part of the alumni now. So welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you, and I'm excited to dive into your story. So I'll start with the first question that I love to ask, which is, where it all started out. So let us know a little bit about, when you had your first period, what that experience was like, if you've ever used hormonal birth control before, and what led you ultimately to choose fertility awareness, both personally and then professionally in your practice.
Yeah. So I got my period when I was 12, and my mom had prepared me a little bit before then, just kind of knowing that she had gotten her period when she was 12 years old. And I wasn't sure what to expect. It was always painful. I ended up getting it at home for the first time. And I remember that my mom announced it to everyone in the family the next Sunday when we were all together, and I was mortified by that. I didn't understand that it was a big deal, but we didn't really have a close relationship in talking about our bodies. Like, I didn't even have a word for my area. I think that we never really talked about that. There was a lot of shame. I did grow up in a very religious background, and all of the women that were my family were all pregnant in their teens. So it wasn't something, it was just kind of a weird topic, like body awareness and body literacy. I think there was a lot that they were still coming to terms with themselves. Yeah, I would say that for the first few years in middle school was tolerable. And then in high school, it started to become significantly painful. I had one experience where I remember screaming on the bathroom floor, begging my mom to help me. We didn't have health insurance then. And so going to the doctor was not really something that was an option. And then I remember her telling me that, apologizing to me, that this is just how it is in our family. And this is just kind of she had a bad period as well. So she did feel a sense of guilt that she was seeing me go through the same things. I did explore birth control when I was in high school. I had another experience where I bled through my pants so badly that I couldn't get up from my chair. It was just this really humiliating and traumatic experience in high school. And then after that, I ended up getting on birth control, which really did help reduce those symptoms. And I stayed on birth control, hormonal birth control, until till I was around 24. And it was about a year and a half or 2 years before I was going to get married. I had a longer engagement. So I was preparing for that. And that was a really stressful phase in my life. And I was experiencing significant pain. I went to the hospital several times, and it wasn't necessarily during my actual period. It was just between then, but there was never really an answer. And I didn't really relate that to anything regarding my period. I just felt like I'm going through a stressful time. So of course I'm breaking out and my hormones are all over the place. I didn't really see these signs as anything. So then I was pursuing education in the health field. I was getting my master's in nutrition and integrative health. During that time, we were looking at blood work and blood chemistries and learning how to interpret them. And I realized that I potentially could have Hashimoto's disease. And so I ended up going to an endocrinologist, telling him that. And then I was formally diagnosed. And then I basically continued on having significant pain and just sort of hiding it and rearranging my life with this pain and not really communicating it to anyone else. So I did start to feel really disconnected from my own body, which is interesting looking back now as a practitioner because I feel like I'm a very compassionate practitioner and I really think about people and take pain seriously. But I didn't recognize how much I didn't take my own pain seriously and how normalized that was for myself until years later.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, Tina, I mean, that you just took us through a significant portion of your life. I mean, first and foremost, it's really traumatic what you went through and compounded by the fact that it's generational. And one of the challenges as a practitioner that we talked about in the program and comes out on the show is that period pain is so common and so normalized that I found in my own practice that if I don't specifically ask about it, it's not something that's necessarily volunteered, because many women who experience pain, especially when it's primary dysmenorrhea, when you've just experienced it from when you started having your periods, it's something that you have in a way learned to live with and you just keep going and you're not even seeking support for it anymore. You're just managing it and it's not even top of mind, even if it's really, really severe. And so to have that picture in my mind of you on the floor, right, begging for help and your mom kind of telling you, and there's your mom's experience of, well, this is just how it is many women's experience of just, this is how it is. I mean, it's looking back now as an adult. I mean, do you have any comment on it? I mean, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I think that you don't realize how much of your perspective on your body and health stems from your growing up, the way that you were raised and your family's perspective. So I think I look back and I feel sad for many generations in my family that they didn't know any better. Or I think in what I look back specifically is the like this religious experience also is that you earn and deserve everything. So pain was also something that you didn't feel like you had control over your health or that there was something that influenced it that you could control that in any way. It was almost like shameful and we didn't have a lot of money and I didn't have health insurance, like I mentioned. So I think that you're in this survival mode and you do learn to ignore all of those things. And then that religious component where I did kind of associate pain with something that I deserved. And so that was also something that I had to work on in my adulthood to realize that I deserved to have pleasure and that pain-free existence was actually possible for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you mentioned that in high school you had another traumatic experience, and anyone who's listening, who's female, who's been through high school, I mean, that's the biggest fear. You lived to survive to tell the tale. But then you mentioned that after that, you went on the pill, right, to try to control the bleeding and try to reduce the pain a bit, and you experienced some relief of symptoms. So question that I have for you is, when did you hear the term endometriosis? At what point was that even brought up? Did anybody say anything to you that would indicate that this was not okay or that your pain was more than what we would consider to be normal?
Yeah. So what was interesting is that, so as I mentioned before, with going through the lab and blood work interpretation, so I pursued health because I felt so confused with health myself. And so I had graduated college and I really didn't know how to take care of myself. So I enrolled in a master's program to learn about nutrition and health and learned more about adverse childhood experiences and how that affects health outcomes. And in my physiology classes, I started to recognize some patterns that I felt related to the symptoms that I was experiencing. And I remember distinctly going to my physiology professor and saying, I think that I have this thyroid condition. And she said, well, when you're going through programs like this, you'll think you have everything. So kind of dismissing it a little bit. And so then when I did do the blood chemistry course and I actually had factual data and the numbers and that in front, like I could feel comfortable and confident in that. And so then I did start to look further into other possible diagnoses and related to that, like my pain. I don't think that I still honestly took it seriously because that was my norm. So I can remember, going through lots of things and ignoring and dismissing my pain. I also felt that because I was in a nutrition and health program that I felt a little shameful for still struggling, right? Because the whole point is nutrition and lifestyle should be able to modify or at least reduce. And I think that the things that I was doing definitely helped and definitely reduced some of the symptoms that I was experiencing. However, I was still experiencing significant pain and I was still hiding it and figuring out how to, again, like work in the real world. And I think that's also another reason why I do work for myself. I have the flexibility to be able to kind of slow down, say no when I need to say no, things like that. But yeah, I think that there's so much there.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like your experience just gives us some important insights. I mean, essentially, you structured your career around it, and you've had to kind of do a lot of things around the pain. And it makes me think about Laura Owen and her concept of reproductive labor, just the amount of effort, money, time, and work as menstruating women that we have to put in that isn't necessarily acknowledged. And so, share with us then. You have this trajectory of now you're an adult. You've gone into your professional program in health to also help you gain deeper insights on for yourself, but also obviously to help other women who may be experiencing similar challenges. So share with us how fertility awareness comes into this conversation and talk a little bit about how being in the FAMM program has impacted what you've done with clients and also with yourself personally.
Yeah. So first, I love you, Lisa, and your work and the opportunity to learn directly from you. The quality of the program was really important to me, and I knew it would be a great experience. I think experiential learning is important for me. I think the case studies with real patients, you require us to chart ourselves and understand everything that comes along with that. And for me, during this program, I felt that I gained the confidence to finally have a laparoscopy. And so that was really important. You provide mentorship in the program, master classes with experts in the field, and there's so much connection between cohorts. And having others listen to me and you listen to me helped me to take myself more seriously in the sense that why am I not doing the surgery or getting that diagnosis, just to, again, understand my options. And that was a big part of this program was me working on myself personally so that I can understand at a different level. I think, like I said before, I think being a compassionate practitioner, it's not only that empathy that you need, but it's also practicality. When I was also going through my nutrition programs, I think that it's easy to come up with protocols and to have like lists of things that a person should do, right? And then there's the practical aspect of learning to meet people where they are. And you really helped to meet me where I was. I always had tracked my cycle in an app. And so that was something that was easy for me. But I think that you worked with me also to kind of with my temperature readings and all of those things that I needed to master for myself. But again, there was no pressure in that. There was also, again, a lot of shame with me with taking pain medicine. I wasn't taking pain medicine and was suffering. And you really helped me to feel better about that and to seek out the things that I needed. So going through that in real time with the support system that I had in this program, and again, to be taken seriously, I think that in the past, I was so nervous that because this was my norm, I thought maybe this is normal. What if I do this surgery and I don't have anything. How am I going to handle that? I was so scared to wake up and for the doctor to tell me, no, there actually isn't something wrong with you. And that was, again, something that made me not or wait so long to actually seek out a proper diagnosis.
There's so much there, Tina. I mean, when I reflect back on our work together, so it does highlight an important part of the FAMM program. It's called a mentorship for a reason. And it's because my experience as a fertility awareness practitioner has led me to believe that it's important if you're going to try to shepherd other women into this conversation. So if you're a practitioner and you want to help other women to chart their cycles, I have found, and I firmly believe that it's important to come from a place of understanding, not from a place of top down. I'm going to tell you everything because I know it all. So when you have to actually chart your fertile signs as part of the program, you see what it really is. And one of the things we talk about a lot in the program is to get out of this idea of perfection. So all of us want to have these perfect cycles with all the, I's dotted and the T's crossed, and like as if we're robots, and to never see any shifts or fluctuations yet. We're human beings and we're always leading busy lives. We have stressful things that happen to us. Sometimes we have to fly out of the country for something, or sometimes during the program you literally moved across the country. And so when we are in these real life situations, we will see these fluctuations. And this is an important, like you said, experiential learning that I feel is necessary in order to help other women to go through the charting aspect of it. So, I mean, back to your story, having you as the practitioner kind of go through that process, we did have many conversations about these things. And your story is so important because so many women are feeling the same way. I often have clients apologize to me or speak apologetically about taking pain medication. Now, within the context of the program, of course, we're looking for a variety of different ways to support you, to reduce inflammation, to identify what's really going on, right? And so the goal isn't like, let's pump her full of meds, right? But on the other hand, the goal is not to say that there's something wrong with taking pain meds when you're in pain, right? So we spoke a lot about having that balance there. It's very humbling and also rewarding to know that our conversations helped to give you the confidence to actually seek out that answer. And it's, I think, important to say also that it's not a cookie cutter thing where every single client who presents with certain symptoms, I'm telling them do this and that. It was really customized to you where your pain was extremely severe and it felt like you did want answers. And so that was one of the reasons why I encouraged you to just consider it. You know what I mean? Whereas, but it's not to say that I have plenty of clients who potentially are just going to act as if and not necessarily go through the laparoscopic procedure, but it was something that was extremely important for you. So maybe share with us a little bit about how that came about and how it went, what you learned, and kind of where you're at now with your pain and just how you've been managing everything.
Yeah. So I think that understanding the diagnosis really enabled me to work on my own preconception health. And it's funny because my practice Conceive was already focused on preconception health. And so for those who are not familiar, preconception health can also it refers to the health of people during their reproductive years, the years that they can have a child. There's a strong focus on protecting the health of the baby, which is, of course, very important. And more specifically, it can be considered the 3 to 6 months prior to conception. In this time frame, your nutrition and lifestyle can help to optimize egg quality and sperm health. But personally, I think about it more broadly because preconception for me is a unique and often transitional phase. And I say that because many people are getting off of birth control, learning about their bodies. Sometimes birth control will have masked a condition or many conditions. It is a time that we can have some unlearning about what we're taught about our bodies, working on mental health, releasing shame, establishing body trust, and learning how to take care of yourself and build a strong health foundation, whether or not you want to have a child. In my case, I wasn't interested in having a child. I think we're all creators. So conception to me can be creative endeavors, or in my case, my practice, or whatever else you're pursuing. So good health and a great quality of life contribute to the way that you choose to live your life. So in my other programs, I learned about more traditional diagnostic tools, which is great. I don't diagnose people. I just utilize testing to provide the best support and care I can within my own scope. But I have helped people finally get the correct diagnosis by explaining the patterns from cycle charting, labs, and symptoms. With that information, they can advocate for themselves and are able to seek out the proper provider that can diagnose and offer further care. And so in my case, after I was finally diagnosed with endometriosis, I started to think about my options in general. What would I recommend for someone? And so at this point, I'm in my mid 30s, and I never thought about having children. I never really desired that. However, I think when you get a diagnosis, you do take it seriously, where the doctor said to me, you may not be able to have a child if you did want to. So I think for me, I wanted to preserve my own options and that choice. And so I kept digging deeper. So I had endometriosis, I have Hashimoto's disease. I think that sometimes those symptoms could also be, masked or confused with other things like SIBO. So then I also looked into more of like my gut health and how that could actually be influencing my pain symptoms and inflammation and things like that. So working on all of the things that we talk about heavily in the program. And so tackling that. And so that was another thing that I needed to do. I supplemented. I did start to feel a lot better after knowing that I did have SIBO and kind of addressing that specifically. And so that did help to relieve a lot of symptoms, inflammation, and pain. And so I did feel like that did provide a relief for me. And then I started to think about freezing my eggs or embryo banking with my partner. And so I basically sat him down and told him that he would be an equal participant for this process, and that preconception is not just for me, but it's also relevant for him as well. And so that was really important for me to feel like we had that partnership and that this was something that we were pursuing together. I think that another thing that I may not have thought about previously was just the fact that, God forbid, there is a divorce or a death, something like that, that I wanted to have eggs and then also do some embryo banking. So that made me feel better mentally. And he was all for it and very, very supportive of that and wanted me to have that relief, just that whatever option was available to me. And so I did pursue some egg freezing and embryo banking after the diagnosis.
As a women's health professional, you already know the value of tracking the menstrual cycle, but I'm guessing that you're not comfortable interpreting complex charts, weird mucus patterns, abnormal bleeding, or other similar situations. You're passionate about fertility awareness and want to use it in your practice, but you're just not sure where to start. That's where FAMM comes in. The next class of FAMM is just around the corner. Registration is now open for the Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. Classes start on October 4th. By the time you finish your FAMM certification, you'll have the skills to confidently teach fertility awareness to your clients, interpret all kinds of complex charting scenarios, and you'll have the step-by-step protocols you need to help your clients improve their hormone and menstrual cycle health. Apply today at fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. And when you apply, we'll send you the details to join one of our upcoming information sessions. Transform your practice in 9 months. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode. And I remember fondly some of the conversations we had around it because, like you said, you encouraged him to be an equal participant. I remember you said, yeah, he's going to just take everything on the list.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I know you have some interesting, just kind of interesting things to share around that. I think that it was such just I suppose a blessing, or just, it was really nice to be able to kind of watch how this unfolded for you, to actually finally, after all those years of struggle, to get the diagnosis, right? And then one of the things that we talk about as well in the FAMM program, when you're working with clients, the diagnosis part, it's important. It's important because as a practitioner, I often ask the question or think about what is going to motivate the client. And so when you're working with somebody, sometimes you can see the signs and they're meeting the criteria and you can have these conversations. But what really flips the person into like motion is often a medical doctor telling them that they have a thing. And that can be positive and negative, because you can also be told that you have a thing that you don't have. And that also, I've seen that in the reverse be very difficult also to work with. But what's very interesting is, yes, what unfolds after that. So in your case, though, you took the kind of power back. And even though you're kind of undecided in the child front, you decided to make sure to preserve that, to do everything that you can to preserve that. And what's interesting about that decision is that even though you weren't actively trying to conceive, in a way, you were acting as though you were, because you had planned ahead of time to do everything you can to ensure that if there's going to be eggs extracted and sperm collected, we're going to get the best quality eggs and sperm that we can within the time frame that we have. So maybe you could share a little bit about that experience. I mean, in our alumni class, we were able to go through and look at the sperm analysis and see the before and after. And I mean, it's something that really validates the concept, because we do have specific fertility strategies for both men and women within the FAMM program that we teach as protocols. So it is nice when you can have that kind of real-time data to show, there's a reason why it's evidence-based. Yes.
Yeah, totally. I think that, so first, I just want to say the diagnosis was so helpful for me. And I also think that sometimes when you get a diagnosis, that can start to define you, or you become very attached to that, right? So, like, you are endometriosis or you are these things. And I think for me, it was really important to look at myself in a way that I was nurturing myself and taking care of myself better. And I was more straightforward with people and had stronger boundaries and respected my diagnosis in that way, right? Like, I have endometriosis, I'm taking it seriously. At the same time, again, I think that sometimes diagnosis can be devastating for people, right? And again, feelings are valid around that. But at the same time, I think I did want to feel empowered by it and take back the narrative that this doesn't have to be that way for me. So what are my options? And yeah, I'm super happy with my partner that he was just so supportive of that. So with the results, I think that I had basically gone to a fertility center, a larger one. So this one has many branches nationally. I think that I just want to say first that I think that I would rethink that in the future. I think that there are these specific egg freezing places. They end up doing it in cohorts. And so you end up having to get on a schedule that may or may not be beneficial to you personally. So I think that that's the first thing I do want to say, because that can influence and affect your results. And so I think that for me, it did. I had a couple like negative occurrences there. However, I did some testing when I was 35, and then I basically took the year to optimize my lifestyle and just be very motivated. And again, with my partner as well. And so at 36 was when I decided to get retested and have my partner's sperm retested to see the results. And so for a while, my husband was, of course, sick of the supplements and sick of doing all of the things. He was a Peloton person. He kind of stopped doing that. And so there was some like major like lifestyle and nutrition changes, reducing
Sorry.
alcohol.
For anyone who doesn't know Peloton, that's like biking, right? Like a serious workout thing.
It's a at home like cycling. And so he stopped drinking as much, which was again, that was like another lifestyle thing that was pretty difficult for him. But at the same time, when he saw the results in black and white and the values significantly improve, he understood the value and what I was talking about. And I think that that's why also testing is so important, understanding your baseline. And so even seeing my own AMH improved, and I ended up retrieving more eggs and embryos than expected. And like I said, my partner's sperm improved significantly. So all of these things were super helpful. And again, I think establishing that baseline was critical and just understanding and being able to really value all of the energy and effort that we had put into this process.
Well, and what's unique about this situation is that you were really able to be kind of like, I don't want to say like guinea pig, but kind of, right? Like you were kind of, you and your partner were kind of that because again, this was very important and obviously also like very expensive. Like this is we've had to put a lot of energy and thought into this, but it's still different than when I'm working with clients who are trying to conceive because it's a different emotional state completely when this is about trying to get pregnant naturally, especially for somebody who has been trying for a long time and is doing these things. So I think what's unique about your situation is that you were, although obviously emotionally invested, etc., it's not the same. Of course, it wouldn't be good to go into this and not get eggs retrieved, right? So you did get the result you were looking for, but I think you know what I'm saying. It's like a different emotional thing. And so, I mean, that for our benefit, we were able to take a look at that. And it shows a couple of important pieces of information, I think, for anyone who's listening who has struggled with fertility challenges. And so one of them is that we're not going to go into the specific results on the podcast because that's not the point of it. But for the record, like we are looking at them. And so there was a significant increase in terms of the numbers, in terms of the actual number of sperm, the count, the morphology number, the motility number. So there was quite a significant increase. And I believe it was, let me see, like kind of a year. Was it a year in between? Am I looking at it wrong?
Yes, I think I sent you the
Yeah.
first time and then there was basically, he really got on track, I would say a few months before that second test. And so, he wasn't as serious as I was with like the surgery and all of that. And to your point, I think there is this different emotion that comes up when you're not specifically looking to conceive, getting motivated, and when it's so much effort. Emotionally, it's expensive. Financially, it's expensive. And so for us to also put ourselves, it's still this other difficulty where you know that you are trying to preserve your options. And I think we really needed to get on the same page where there was still emotional things that would come up because you just did want it to be successful because you don't even know what you want. And so at the same time, you're like, I just hope that it works out and it improves. So yeah, I think in this it was very tricky, but again, there was that motivation of wanting to see the difference. And with him, I think that my preconception was longer. So I had, started to think about it after the laparoscopy. I waited a year, and then I again with like all the SIBO, I did psychedelic therapy. I was working really hard on myself and getting my own mental health and physical body ready for this. And so he kind of jumped. He was, again, as a support system throughout my own process and a very engaged partner in support. But I think for his results, he probably started like 3 months before that second test was taken.
He
And
kind of
it
like
was
really dove in.
right where like the alcohol stopped and all of the other things where he really kind of saw myself and how important it was to me and recognized that I really do need to do my part with her.
Well, and that's really helpful to know because, I mean, what I've observed is that it doesn't take a year to start to see the results, but it's a process. And what I've observed is that when you jump in and you start doing it, you don't start to see those results until 3 to 4 months after you've really, started to whether it's changing the dietary things or reducing some of the potentially negative influences and things like that. But then it doesn't just stop, it continues to improve as you keep going. I think as you were talking, one of the main differences as someone I've worked with many women who are trying to conceive over the long haul. What's different is that because you're not actively trying, it's not this disappointment month after month. It's a very different experience of going through 6 months to a year when you're not actively trying versus just making these changes and then having that kind of, it's almost like the final exam right after the situation. What's interesting as well is that it's known that women with endometriosis have lower AMH levels in general. So if you have a bunch of women who are tested, the women with endometriosis are more likely to have a lower number. So there's several things that are kind of associated. The AMH conversation is very interesting. I had a couple of interesting podcast episodes where I went into that. And I've worked with a lot of women, particularly recently, who are told that the AMH number doesn't change and there's nothing you could do to affect it and those kinds of things. And so in your case, I mean, it did significantly improve after your concerted effort over that period of time, which I also find interesting. And as you said, you did as a result of that. So just as the little kind of mini lesson for anyone who missed that part of some of the prior episodes, AMH is most highly correlated with IVF success and egg retrieval. So when you're specifically looking at ART type assisted reproductive technology options, you do want as strong of an AMH number as you can have because it is correlated with that. And in your case, you were able to increase the number over time. So it's not stagnant. It does change it can change. And that coincided and correlated also with a better retrieval. As you had mentioned, you were able to retrieve more than they had anticipated, which is really great.
Yeah, exactly. So I was very happy when waking up and realizing that all of the work, like you said, it was almost like cramming for a final exam. And I really didn't know what was going to happen until you got there. And then even the embryos, how many are going to be good quality and or survive. I mean, in practice, thankfully, I've had really wonderful results with clients and patients, but at the same time, I mean, there are some not so good results sometimes, right? That like you hear and are devastating for people. And so again, you just never know what you're going to expect. There are no guarantees. And so I think that's the scary part.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I really appreciate you sharing your journey. Like I said, it's unique, but there's so many aspects of your journey that so many women have experienced themselves and can relate to. And I just love how candid and open you are about it. It's really nice to be able to have this conversation with you. And as we start wrapping up, I mean, I'd love to hear just, for the woman who's listening, who tuned in potentially because the word endometriosis is going to be in the title somewhere. And so I'm sure there's plenty of women who've tuned in to kind of learn a little bit more. What would you want them to know? And also, I'd like to ask about your experience in FAMM and how that played into everything for you as well.
Yeah, I would say that there's hope and there is support out there. That's the number one thing. I think that when you're in pain, you get into really bad places where mentally you feel that you should be more productive or you just can spiral. And I think that that's always a difficult place to be. And so I think that knowing you're not alone, knowing that there are options out there for you, ways to improve your symptoms and sort of take back that narrative, I think is the most important messaging. I think that your program offers all of that kind of information for people who are interested in diving really deep in not only endometriosis, PCOS, or all of these other conditions. And it doesn't have to be problem specific, right? It's really, for me, what I've realized is quality of life is so important. And I think however I can improve that, and whether that be even understanding my cycle better for my physical activity, performance, work, right? Productivity, all of those things matter. And so there's so many ways that cycle charting and that information can be a tool for anyone who's interested. And because women's health is constantly evolving, and I love that you stay up to date with all of that for us and you share that information. And again, the cohort support, your mentorship continued guidance. I think for practitioners who maybe have a solo practice, I think it's really wonderful to be able to still have that team and support and be able to talk about your difficult cases and things like that. So I think that there's so much value, and I'll continue to be in your alumni program because I love it so much, because there's so much that you offer that there's always more and more that you can dive into, or I'm always just learning something new. So
well, thank you so much. That's such a nice testimonial for the FAMM program. Well, Tina, tell us a little bit about you, where you are in the world, your practice, your website, your socials. Let us all know where we can go, and especially those who may be able to work with you.
yeah, so I'm the founder of Conceive, a practice that's dedicated to proactive and holistic preconception planning that centers around the time before you're officially trying. I'm a board certified nutrition specialist and a licensed dietitian nutritionist. I have a master's degree in nutrition and integrative health and a doctorate of clinical nutrition. I've also done several other certification programs, which again, why I pursued Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program, that attracted me for so many reasons. You can find me at Let's Conceive. Conceive is spelled CONCEV. And you can also check out my website, conceive.co. Again, that's CONCEV.co, or on Instagram at Hey Dr. Tina.
Amazing. Well, I will make sure to share all of those links in the show notes for those who are on the go. This has been just such a nice conversation, Tina. I'm so glad to have had you on the podcast, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon in the alumni program.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/487. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Tina. It was just such a treat to have her on the show, and I really appreciated her openness and willing to share her story. One of the parts of her story that really stood out to me was when she said that she was nervous of even getting the laparoscopic procedure done, even though her symptoms were quite extreme. She really did meet those definitions when you're looking for the common symptomology of endometriosis. It was really interesting to hear her say that she was worried that they would go in there and not find anything, and basically tell her that she was completely fine. And when you hear that, I just hope you recognize how significant that is, and how all of these different factors can delay or prevent women from getting the treatment, the investigation, the diagnosis. And then couple that with many physicians who aren't necessarily either aware of the signs, or they're simply working from the place of, okay, I prescribe drugs for symptoms, and so if you have these symptoms, we're just going to prescribe drugs. The endometriosis situation is shameful. It should never take a decade to diagnose something that's so debilitating. And I recognize that not every woman is going to decide to have a laparoscopic procedure, but there are certain situations where it's so extreme, it's interfering with your life, potentially interfering with your fertility. And for many women, they need to have that confirmation of what's really going on here. There are situations where we can act as if, where you can have these symptoms and treat it like it was already diagnosed and move forward. And there are other situations where getting the diagnosis is really the spark that gets everything going for a woman's treatment plan. Whether that's the thing that gets her to start taking action on certain things, to make calls, to start having appointments with different professionals, to take the dietary and lifestyle plan to that next level and really go full throttle. I've just seen the power essentially of a correct diagnosis to really catapult a client, a woman, into action. In Tina's case, her choice to move toward egg freezing and embryo freezing, to really focus on preserving her fertility, even though she's not even sure if she's going to have children. My observation was that those decisions wouldn't necessarily have been made or made in that short order. So in terms of her kind of quick turnaround time frame, had she not received that diagnosis and had that unfortunate encounter with her doctor who told her that she may not be able to conceive naturally due to her condition. That is just an example for you to ponder of how powerful a diagnosis can be, even for somebody who appears to have the symptoms and we feel like it's probably that. It's just different coming from your doctor. It's different when it's confirmed through diagnostic means. What also stood out to me was how Tina's experience in the FAMM program helped her to gain the confidence that she needed to move forward on this. And a big part of that was being in an environment where we're educating on the diagnostic requirements, the symptomology, so that you understand what these conditions are. We're really going through in detail. And that's a big part of our work, educating clients. Obviously, that's a big part of the podcast. When we arm women with information about their health, when we use charting to understand what's going on in our bodies and understand what's happening hormonally, when we understand what's normal and what isn't normal, even this period pain, it's like this hill I'm going to die on where I always want to talk about it so that we are clear on just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal, and moderate to severe pain is never something that we should consider to be just a normal part of having a period. You know, this basic piece of information, millions of women don't have it, and they suffer and suffer and suffer, often not even seeking support because they just feel like it's just how it's supposed to be. And so this is the power of education. This is the power of empowering, but this is the power of empowering women to understand what's going on and take that active role in their lives. I mean, what a difference that made. And it breaks my heart to imagine how many women right now, right this moment, are suffering with extreme pain and no information beyond take this painkiller. And if this painkiller doesn't work, we'll give you a stronger painkiller. And if this stronger painkiller doesn't work, we'll give you an even stronger one. You know, that's it. Or we'll put you on the pill and give you a painkiller. That's the extent of the support that so many women receive. And this is something that we need to change. All right, rant over. I hope that you had a wonderful weekend, whenever you're tuning into the show. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting. And that's a wrap. If you're loving the FAMM Practitioner series, then I know you'll love our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. It's a 9-month immersive experience that will completely transform the way you work with clients, allowing you to not only teach fertility awareness to your clients, but to use the menstrual cycle as a vital sign and diagnostic tool in your women's health practice. Our next class starts on October 4th, so there's still time to reserve your spot. Apply now at fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive, and when you apply, you'll have the opportunity to join one of our upcoming information sessions for additional details. There are no other programs like this offered anywhere. Transform your practice in 9 months. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive to apply now. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive.